Fans of Beyond the Gates of Antares, the Horus Heresy and resin sci-fi vehicles in general, thank you very much for joining me for a build video. And today's is something a little bit different. So if anyone watched my review of the miniature haul I got from Salute 2017, one of the things I picked up was a tank for the Warlord Games Beyond the Gates of Antares. And this is the Algoryn AI Liberator Plasma Destroyer Tank. There we go, nice little picture, smart looking vehicle. I finally caught up with building stuff and I have it ready for final assembly. So there are several resin components and then we've got some white metal parts as well. What I'm going to do in this video is do that final assembly. Now I've magnetised the weapons, however I've got a couple of magnets left to do and then the turret. So I'm also going to mount a couple of magnets as well. Hopefully going to end up with a nice assembled tank at the end of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow my typical format. While I put this together, I've got a few topics that I'm going to talk to you about, things that have interested me, caught my eye, and just otherwise made me think a bit. And the main topic I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk a lot about this in this film, are my impressions of the recent Alien film that's been released, Alien Covenant, which is a prequel sequel, so it follows on directly from the earlier prequel film to Alien, Prometheus. So I've seen this film twice with different friends and I've sort of digested it for a week and I'm now going to talk about my impressions because it's an interesting film, as is often the case whenever you get xenomorphs involved. Right, so let's talk about some tools first. We have some knives. We have a razor sharp knife and a blunt knife in case we've got any cutting to do. Shouldn't have any cutting to do, everything's cleaned up. A needle file, curved upper surface, flat underside, tapering to a point. Got a bradawl spike for locating holes, we will definitely need that. And probably quite a lot of this video is going to be about drilling to mount magnets. So I've got a couple of pin vices. Firstly this one, this drill, this is about, I think this is slightly over 5mm, it's about 5mm. And those are to mount these magnets, but not put these too close to my smartphone. These are 5x3 and these are 4x3mm. The 4x3s I'm using for weapon mounts, the 5x3s I'm going to use on the turret. Dusty brush in case it's needed. And then I've also got a smaller pin vise as well. And that smaller pin vise is going to be for drilling some holes for some piano wire pins. Because this is a fairly large model and I don't want it to come apart. You know what? I don't want it to come apart. You know what I'm like. I pin things to death. I probably over-engineer my builds, but hey ho, it keeps me happy. A couple of types of super glue, a medium thin super glue and then a thick one as well. Can of accelerant just in case. I think that's probably about all. Let's get going. Right, let me first show you the parts for this kit. So the Liberator tank for the Algoryn is made up of 5 resin components. So there is a hull, which is this part, and then there is a turret, like so, and the turret sits on top there. You can see in the turret, I've mounted a magnet, and that's to take a whole variety of weapons. So this vehicle comes with this main gun here, which is a plasma cannon, and I've mounted a magnet in there like so. And look at that, there you go. Clips, nice affirmative fit there. I'm really pleased with how this worked out. And in the kit, you also get this weapon here, which is a plasma light support gun. And that equally drops in there. I also bought the weapons pack. So we have a variety of other guns. Firstly, we have the compression cannon, the mag cannon, and finally a fractal cannon for something really esoteric and sci-fi looking. So yeah, very good. In terms of the main hull assembly, it's like that. And then there are also these wings. I don't know if we call them wings or stabilizers. And that's kind of the final look we're going for. So pretty straightforward thing to build, bit of magnet to put in here, bit of pinning to do on each of these parts. There'll be some milliputting required to get a smooth profile on the hull. Let me show you that. So yeah, slight size mismatch. It's not massive, it's not worth replacing. So yeah, I'll use some milliput to get that all lined up. I need to get these detail lines lined up as well. So that's that bit. And then we've also got a couple of these two mini micro turrets, and these sit in the main turret, and they're kind of like sensors and point defense weapons as well. Very neat little model, this. Right, so we will start with, I think we'll start by putting the magnet. We'll put the magnet in here for the turret. So we will make a start with the turret. So, as usual, I've got my Bradle spike to get a locating hold in. Might as well do this at the same time. I have to admit, I recently swapped my smartphone. Well, the previous smartphone, which was still a very good smartphone, Mrs. Leakycheese had been angling for one, but she's not kind of that keen on forking out full price on a contract or even buying a handset. That's not her MO. So I did a deal with her, and she's taken my previous handset, which is still a very good handset, and I bought this new one, which is an iPhone 7. And I must admit, the camera performance is somewhat, particularly on the focus, I've noticed for doing these videos, is much better. So it's nice. I also got a much bigger capacity phone, so I kept filling it with videos in about 10 seconds flat. What I'm starting off by doing is a guide hole. We're going to go up to this large drill, about 5mm. So to start with, I'm going to just do a thinner guide hole using this drill bit here. Anyway, yes, conversation topics are content this week. So I've got a few videos planned for this week. Discuss what my aim is. Then I'm going to talk about the main topic for this video will be, I'll tell you about a brush with our spiritual liege, and then I'll go on to talking about Alien Covenant. It's a pretty decent guide hole, and let's do the same here. Interestingly, the resin here is somewhat different, a slightly different texture to Forge World, and I would actually say it's a little bit softer than Forge World. It's certainly got more plasticity, or certainly more elasticity to it. And in the bump in the little guide to the kit that Warlord Games provide, they do actually say that this is a specifically formulated resin compound to try be more flexible so it doesn't shatter in the event you drop it. And Clumsy Chops here, me, did actually drop this forward prong, and it survived quite nicely, and sometimes resin can shatter, and it does have a noticeable degree of flexibility to it. So, and it does have a different surface texture, so I'm inclined, so I do believe them when they say that. They have applied a bit of science to this, and they're not just gone with perhaps a typical resin compound. But of course, there's a trade-off. I mean, I think Forge World resin is nicer to sand and file overall. This isn't bad. This will clog up your files a little bit quicker, and it's much softer than, say, I don't know, sort of stuff that you'll get in military models, or say those Victorian miniature female troopers I made, which is quite a hard resin. Right, so I'll now expand up to this one. So that's my plan. Right, so let's go to the top and discuss this week's content. So, firstly, as I'm sure many of you will have seen, I did an out-of-the-pack review of the new Custodian Heavy Dreadnought, the Telamon. This is a super shoulder pads dreadnought, and it was on early release at the Warhammer Fest, so I picked one up. It's a model that I really like because it's a nod to early Rogue Trader models. And you know, I don't know, do I need a dreadnought for my Custodians? Probably not, but it's a nice model and I do like it, and I have to admit I've got a bit of a soft spot for building Forge World dreadnoughts. I do enjoy it, so yeah, anyway, I got one. That fits fine. I'm gonna have to work on this to expand it up to fit this 5mm. So I've not got a... Yeah, so around the Telamon, I'm going to do a time-lapse build. It's been a while since I've done one of those, but it's a perfect candidate to do a time-lapse build on. So that'll be the first thing I do. And I'll then follow it up with a model review. I can't do a rules and tactics review yet because we don't have any rules for the Telamon. So that will have to come at some point in the future. But you know me, once it comes, I'll get that out to you. So this hole is starting to shape up quite nicely now, or open up quite nicely perhaps. I will continue producing videos on the upcoming 8th edition, which I'm very interested and excited about. And going to Warhammer Fest this weekend didn't help that. It only made me even more excited about it. So that was a very bad thing. It wasn't really, I'm only joking. And so I'll continue those. I think because I want to get some other content in this week around models and other stuff, I might try and consolidate those videos into longer videos, dealing with more posts at a time, just because it's easier to do like one large video than say 5 small ones or something like that. So I think I'll change my format a bit for this week so I can get some model content in as well. So I've only got a certain finite amount of time, unfortunately. So the 8th edition will continue, and the coverage on 8th edition is interesting because a set of the core rules has been leaked on our favourite leaky place. It's not WikiLeaks, Reddit, which for material not pertaining to national security seems to be the preferred leak location. So yeah, so the core rules have been leaked. When they say leaked, I suspect it might be a deliberate leak because we're getting awfully close to the release date. Yeah, people were playing the game anyway at the weekend, so I don't know. I'm not sure if it's actually a leak or if GW's deliberately released them. So I'm not sure about that. Anyway, I've got those rules now, so I'm in two minds as to whether or not to continue covering bulletins or just go and do a full-on review of the rule set. So I'm still having to think about that, which I have read, and it is intriguing. Right, how much bigger does this need to be to fit this larger magnet? So I wanted a larger magnet on this turret to make sure it doesn't flop off. Or because with a turret on a vehicle, obviously the risk is somebody, when you're gaming, somebody goes, "Oh, can I pick this up?" and they pick it by the turret. So I don't want it. I don't know, I wanted a slightly firmer attachment. So yeah, anyway, so that's content for this week. So I hope there's something that interests you in amongst those topics. So what was the next thing I was going to talk about? Oh, this is a silly one, right? What did I call it? A brush with our spiritual liege. So our spiritual liege, if you're not familiar with the meme, and I believe I can call this a meme, the spiritual liege is none other than Matt Ward. And I was at Warlord Games probably about a month back now, and as I was walking along, I felt reality start to distort and the balance of the world start to shift. And I looked up, and there with a group of other, I think GW guys, yeah, there was, because there was a white dwarf guy there, was none other than Matt Ward, gosh. So he was hanging around with a couple of what I presume were GW people. So I know I'd heard that he's writing again. I was just a bit surprised to see him down at the same industrial estate where Warlord Games have got their shop. I don't know if GW, there's a whole load of industrial units there. I don't know if Games Workshop have rented one out because Warlord have only got like a relatively small section of it. Yes, that was a brush with our spiritual liege. Yes, and I did feel reality distort, and I lost my sense of balance for a few seconds while they passed. Oh, actually, I forgot an item of planned content. I talked about the 8th edition stuff. I forgot to mention that I want to finally get my 7th episode of Retro Hammer done this week, which is looking at Slaves to Darkness or Rogue Trader era Traitor Space Marine miniatures. Many years ago, I collected a World Eater army. And it's made up of all those old models, and people who had Slaves to Darkness will know what I mean. And unlike a lot of my armies of that era, I actually held on to it, and I've still got most of it. I sold a couple of bits, or painted to the same standard as the rest, but I did keep the core of it. So I'm going to do that as a Retro Hammer episode because it's a nice nostalgia trip. It's also fun. I think it'll be fun to look at some really old models and look at what Chaos Marines used to look like back in the day. Particularly, I guess that's quite interesting given that the 8th edition box set, Dark Imperium, is going to feature the latest iteration of Chaos Marine models, this time in the form of Plague Marines of the Death Guard. So I thought it'd be quite a fairly topical time to look at those old World Eater models. So yeah, if you're interested in Retro Hammer, keep an eye out for that. I mentioned it a couple of times, and I know a couple of you guys and girls in the comments keep asking about it, and I mean, I've just, stuff comes up, don't get around to doing it, but I do intend to get it. Last weekend, or was it the weekend before? Possibly the weekend before, I spent some time touching up all the models because I got a few chips and knocks from, I mean, I do store them carefully, but they had quite a few bits of damage, so I've touched those up so they'll look, well, I don't know if I'd say they'll look good because I painted these around 25 years ago, but they will look as neat as they did when I finish them, if that makes sense to you. There won't be chips and the rest of it there. So they should look at least reasonably handsome. There's quite a nice banner. I think the painting's a bit dated, but I did paint a couple of banners, and the company standard, I'm actually still quite proud of it now. So yeah, that's something to keep an eye out for. So this is gradually getting to the right sort of size. I hope it gets there soon. I don't want to run out of time just drilling this hole. I should have really had the correct size drill, so that's me for being a fool. It will all accelerate soon. Right, what we're talking about now. Okay, Alien Covenant. Let us move on to Alien Covenant now. Just flip that over. I've got a big stack of, I made a big stack of notes because I had all sorts of thoughts that this film triggered in me. So Alien Covenant was released, I don't know, is it 3 weeks back now? 2-3 weeks back? And it is Ridley Scott's third Alien film that he's directed, and this time he was the executive director, I believe. I don't know if he was executive director before, I don't know what the difference is. But yeah, it's his third one, so Alien, then Prometheus, and now Alien Covenant. So it's always a big deal for me. I am a long-standing fan of the Alien franchise's films because I grew up in the 80s, and in the 80s, and I saw that these were films I saw in my fairly young years, and they were very, well, they're great films. They're amongst the best sci-fi ever made, I think. And they, yeah, made quite an impression, and my love of the genre continues to this day. Ooh, it nearly fits. A little bit bigger. So a few years back we had Prometheus, and I was super duper excited when Prometheus got announced. Having seen the film a number of times, both at the cinema and then watched it myself, including the extended cut on Blu-ray, it is a film I'm still, I don't know, can't decide if I love it or hate it. I probably both love and hate it. On a certain level, I like it because it tries to examine the alien story and explore it in a new way. It's a very visually impressive film, a wonderful visual film. It really is. You can't knock it for that at all. And it has the nice mixture of models and CGI for special effects. You know, uses CGI on spacecraft and the landscapes, and then using models for stuff up closer and the sets. So I like that. So that I liked. Now the bit I hate though is the way the film, it basically destroys suspension of disbelief because because of how the crew was scripted to act. Not because it's poorly acted. I mean, apart from the main scientist guy who didn't really impress me. I wasn't very keen on him. I don't think he was particularly well cast, unless you wanted someone you didn't care about, and were kind of relieved when David gave him some black goo. Yeah, and the crew basically behaved like morons. And for the way it was set up as a research ship, I just couldn't believe how stupid the crew behaved and their lack of professionalism. And that, although I like kind of the story of the film and and all that, I don't know, the crew were just as stupid as heck. And it seems like Ridley Scott sacrificed believability in favour of a very fast, well-paced film. I mean, pacing-wise, Prometheus is an incredible film. Suspension of disbelief-wise, it's horrible. It's terrible though. Yeah, and that's why I love and hate it. So, when Alien Covenant was announced, I was both excited and concerned, and for that very reason, because Ridley Scott had changed, a bit like something exposed to black goo perhaps. He had changed a lot in the intervening years in terms of how he produced an Alien film. And that definitely worried me, because I was thinking, are we going to get Prometheus Redux? And we did, in a way, but I will come back to that. So the way I'm going to tackle Alien Covenant is I'm going to kind of go through categories of impressions I got. I mean, I don't really want to get into talking through the plot in great detail. I mean, the basic plot of Alien Covenant is there is a terraforming ship that's on its way. It's a colony ship, not terraforming ship. It's a colony ship on its way, and things happen. And then we get an encounter. Well, we get encounters, and it is a direct sequel to Prometheus. So it's not a kind of prequel thing. It does follow directly from a Prometheus story, although there is a gap of, I think, around 10 years. Oh, before going any further, there's going to be more spoilers in this video than a Formula 1 grid, a Formula 1 starting grid. So yeah, if you've not seen the film and you don't want to lose any surprise, you have been warned. So let me start off by saying some of the positives about this film, and not entirely like Prometheus, Alien Covenant is a wonderfully visually impressive film. It is beautiful to look at, and there's just no denying it. The on-location sets are fantastic, and some of them are really breathtaking. And it's funny, one part of it, the bit where I think they're in the wheat field at the start, I don't know why, but it triggered a memory of watching one of, Ridley Scott's first ever film, which is called The Duelists. Yes, very good film. It's got Harvey Keitel in it. Just forget the name of the other lead actor. But yeah, it's set at the time of the Napoleonic Wars. Very good very good film. Great story. If you want to see Ridley Scott's early work, The Duelists is a great place to start. Got my magnet haul light, so I can splodge some glue in. So yeah, location was fantastic. There was, like Prometheus, and perhaps even more so, there's some fantastic sets. This would be both in terms of sets such as the Alien Juggernaut spacecraft, which the adventurers visit, and also the interior of the Covenant itself. This is all very impressive stuff, but I think I'm going to need to put 2 magnets in here now, so to go deeper. Yeah, so set's brilliant. Terraforming bay on the Covenant's med bay, the colonists' transport area, the colonist storage area, all looked very impressive, and they looked like sets as well, so it gave it it felt authentic, and you didn't have that veneer of plastic unreality you get with CGI sets. So that's all positive stuff. That great models, great model making, a mixture of things that made this really good. I mean, you had both models for things like the landing space shuttle, and the landing shuttle, for all the landers. It looked really great. It did, and it really pulled you in. And the design, the way they've been designed, had a neat. They felt very different to the vessel in Covenant, which is kind of like a research ship, and the vessel in Alien, which is a commercial ship, and the vessel in Aliens, which were military ships. So it did have this kind of civilian exploration feel to it, which is a neat little thing. There you go. So got those magnets in there. Very neat. Very nice to get another original kind of representation of a spacecraft. So I like that. Now, on the visual side, there was one thing that did annoy me though, or annoys probably not, that's a bit strong a word, that's a bit first world problem, isn't it? The bit that I wasn't keen on, and I think they could have done better, was around, oh, this is getting low, the use of CGI for the xenomorphs and neomorphs. I know it allows them to do fancy running, jumping stuff, but they always look like computer generated. Oh yeah, look at that. That's a really nice, tight, affirmative fit. Yeah, very good. And then if we drop in the plasma cannon, very good. I'll have to, maybe I won't paint that bit there, so I can, or maybe put some gloss varnish on there and there when I paint this for easy moving. Right, so that we've got the magnets in the turret. Right, now we're going to pin, let's do the nose. So yeah, the CGI alien disappointed me a bit, and I would have liked models, or well, not models, guys in suits, isn't it? Well, maybe girls in suits. Yeah, there's no reason why an alien couldn't be a female actress. Right, where should we put? Well, I think we'll just wang a couple of pins in there, and that'll do fine. Yeah, I mean, I know I'm super cautious with pinning stuff, but it's just that sort of thing. You imagine you drop it and it breaks. It's like, oh crikey! For the sake of a couple of pins, why take the risk? So CGI alien was let down, but overall, visually, a superb film. And oopsie, sorry about that. Gave the camera a bit of a whack there, getting too enthusiastic. It was a real feast to watch, and I suppose really that is exactly the same observation you would make of Prometheus. Prometheus was a visually gorgeous film to watch. The whole, everything about the design and the portrayal was absolutely spot on. Now, so that was a good element of Alien Covenant. Now we're going to get on to a bad part of Alien Covenant, and this for me is really bad, and this is kind of what really bugs me about this film, and it's exactly the same thing that bugged me about Prometheus, and this is to do with suspension of disbelief. Now, if you're going to have a sci-fi film where you've got a bunch of colonists in the far, far future in an incredibly sophisticated spacecraft, you need, it's a sci-fi story, it needs to be believable, and you need to kind of buy into the people and the environment they're being presented in and think, yeah, I can kind of imagine that working. And then if you can get that right, then the rest of the film will follow. And then the events of the film are going to kind of fit within that framework. Alien Covenant, for me, fails spectacularly on suspension of disbelief. Not because the planet wasn't believable, the planet was fine. Was a colonist ship 100 years in the future with 2,000 colonists aboard disbelievable? I think it's wildly over-optimistic. I don't think that much technological advancement will happen. You know, if you'd stuck it 400 years in the future, I'd have believed it more. Easier to believe. I think the date suffers badly from sci-fi over-optimism. But no, it was nothing to do with that. Right, it's all to do with how the characters behave. So let's start, and I've got a long list of suspension of disbelief issues. The first is around the premise where after the neutron pulse, which damages a covenant and leads to the death of the captain and around 50 colonists, so if I remember rightly, they become aware of a nearby planet, which they then scan and find has highly favourable conditions for life in terms of its gravity, oxygen, atmospheric oxygen, and other essentials to life. Now, and at this point, instead of going back into hypersleep and continuing on with their original mission, they basically, in effect, a whim, decide to change the destination point of their mission. Now, this was just, I just couldn't buy into this at all. Not even, it wasn't even slightly difficult to believe. It was completely unbelievable. And for several reasons. The first thing was, as a prologue to the film notes, and you can tell from the film, that the Covenant is they describe it as being the biggest terraforming mission ever, or the biggest colony mission ever. And you get the feeling that it would have been the sort of mission that would have required the investment of every nation on the earth, if they could ever agree, to make happen. It was, you could, you know, it just felt that way. It wasn't a routine mission. This was pioneering, cutting edge stuff. The people who would go on missions like that would be the very best of the best, and they would not make rash decisions like this. And this is my first problem. The guy who becomes the new captain is portrayed as being a spineless, basically, and unsure. Well, not spineless, but having a lot of self-doubt, and feels he isn't respected and trusted by the crew. And the story tries to spin a kind of religious bent on that this guy has a religious belief and therefore he isn't trusted or isn't respected the same. I don't know. And basically they kind of say that it seems to come down to the fact that they find this alternate world, and one second, I'll just line this up. They find this alternate world, so I'm just put some pins in there. Now I'm going to drill the pin, locate the holes to drill in here. That'll do. So yeah, they find this alternate world, and then they abandon their original mission, which was based on all this careful, as the character of Daniels now notes, was based on lots of careful reconnaissance. They'd found somewhere, they knew what it was like, etc., etc. But no, the captain decides to abandon pursuing that goal because he's afraid of putting his crew back into hypersleep because of the accident that happened. I just didn't buy that at all. It's like, no, you wouldn't take that risk. You wouldn't take that risk with 2,000 lives plus. So that was a massive cross for me, and it's like, no. So the problem for me there is, straight at the start of this film, I didn't believe what was happening. It's like, no, you wouldn't have a guy that was so, I don't know, which was lacking in confidence as, well, you wouldn't have him at all. You wouldn't have anyone of that with those characteristics on a mission like that. And then the fact that he's able to adjust the destination of this mission just confounded, I don't know, I just couldn't buy it for a second. So yeah, so that was the first problem. The next thing was around the romantic involvement of all the crew. So basically, the whole of the crew, so the conscious crew, not the colonists, were all coupled up one way or another. Ridley Scott, or the script, whoever wrote this part of the script, had used it as a plot device to introduce tension, to try and introduce tension between the crew. They were trying to make them more personable, I think. And I think trying to make them more relatable too. But again, instead of doing that, it achieved the opposite in my mind. They just came across as being not professional enough and too emotionally involved with one another. Despite, I mean, it was a one-trip colony mission, yes, I know, but still, you might imagine that the way you'd psychologically deal with that is your operating crew, you would have their partners, if they had them, in hypersleep. So yeah, so that kind of niggled, and the whole crew just seemed to be unprofessional, and yeah, I don't know, they didn't seem of a sufficient caliber for the mission that they were being portrayed as undertaking. Ridley Scott tried to create a kind of like almost like a bunch of colonist civilians. So again, this is sort of like a bit like the visual comparisons I was making with the film. In the same way he wanted to create a new look for the Covenant spacecraft, he also wanted to create a new feel for the crew. So it had commercial crew, we'd had research crew, we'd had military crew. Now he's got a colony crew. It didn't work though. Not for me anyway. So yeah, anyway, and this just kind of like got worse. I mean, so they changed course. They go to this planet. I just forget its name now. They get there, and then what do? So they then decide they're going to go down to the planet's surface. Yeah, they decide they're going to go down to the planet's surface. How many people do you think they send? So they got, I think, I don't know, 15, 16 crew. So how many crew do you send? Do you send 4 or 5 or 2? No, they send a dozen. So they send virtually the entire operational crew of a ship down to this planet. It's like, you have got to be kidding me. You have got to be having a giraffe. You have put your entire mission in jeopardy, even more than you've already done, by sending this big bunch of people down there. If they get into trouble, you're screwed. Again, that's done. Oh, I tell you, that's a strong fit. So I'm now going to have to do some work to line up that, to kind of sculpt this so it's all smooth. Let's move on to the wings. Wing 1. 1 pin or 2 pin? I think 2 pin. Yeah, so it was like it was just like a whole bunch of redcoats, and it's like, again, it's like, no, you wouldn't take such a risky decision as that, sending everybody down. And yeah, again, it kills the suspension of disbelief. Well, for me anyway. Yeah, and again, yeah, just unprofessional. Once they'd sent a dozen crew down to the planet's surface, they get there, and what do they then do? They then go and start exploring in the equivalent of hiking gear. And it's like, you have got to be joking. Aside from the fact they didn't actually do any surveying from orbit, no, they just strolled straight down, or didn't even give you the impression it had happened. See, in Prometheus, they at least talked about the atmospheric composition of the planet, and it only needed to be one line, but they made it quite clear the air was unbreathable, even though it was very close to Earth's atmosphere. No, not here. But anyway, I don't know, maybe they did talk about that. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh, I just forget now. But yeah, so they went down and they're not wearing any environmental protection at all. And that just serves as a useful plot device for 2 of the crew members to get exposed to the black goo and precipitate the first crisis and encounter with, well, in this case, the neomorphs, I believe they're called, yes. So it's like, that was like, no, you would have you would have worn some environmental protection. The next thing, right, so much later in the film, these aren't in any particular order, so I do apologise. Much later in the film, one moment. All right, just let me do my little bit here before I get distracted. So yeah, much later in the film, a xenomorph gets aboard the Covenant, and an alarm goes off. And okay, fine. So the ship has a system to detect alien life forms, and it even said it that way. And Daniels gets alerted, and the captain, I just forget his name, the guy with the cowboy hat and the beard, they get alerted. But the other two surviving crew, because just about a whole bunch of them are dead at this point, they decide it's time to get it on down in the shower. And, you know, from a plot point of view, I could kind of understand what this was getting at. These people, these two, I mean, they were one of the couples, and they were the only couple to survive. So you could see that, you know, they thought, well, you know, let's just celebrate the fact that we both survived. Anyway, it sort of showed them in the shower getting it on, and one sec. They were listening to some music and they turned it up, and for some reason there was no adequate alarm system in this part of the ship, so they knew that there was an alien life form alert. So okay, I can imagine, and I just couldn't quite imagine that. It's like there's no way you wouldn't hear an alert, and the ship would have been designed in such a way that if an alert happens, you would have visual warnings and as well as audio warnings, and the audio warnings would override any other sort of intercom or sound equipment that was happening at the time, to make sure a critical warning like that got heard. But no, in this, no, they turned the music up too much, and they didn't hear the alarm. So then they were in a perfect place to get alien stomped. Well, I think it was a lot of, I'll come back to that, because actually this is, I'm then going to really confuse you by saying this is actually now one of the good parts of the film, but that's for, that's slightly different, so I'll come back to that. Anyway, so I've got 2 pins in there. So this is 1mm piano wire, so it's really stiff. It's very strong. There's no, I mean, once this is together, it would take probably a xenomorph to break it apart, really. Right, let's do the second one, and then I'll drill into this afterwards. Right, next point, jumping around again in terms of the film progression. The ship's captain was very blasé with the safety of the ship. So part of the plot revolves around the fact that another stupid part with the Redcoat mission, they all head down to the planet, and they do so despite the fact that there's very substantial electromagnetic storms. So, and unsurprisingly, their communication gets cut off. Oh, there's no surprise. The film then portrays the fact that they have to take to re-establish communication, they would need to take the colony ship down to a lower altitude. However, there was a risk to the vessel of being damaged by going too close to the turbulence of the storm, and eventually the captain kind of forces his way and does it, and he even gets the 2 crew to agree. It's like, no, you wouldn't take the risk with the 2,000 colonists. So again, another part of how the plot was written, that just another failure to suspend the disbelief. It just made you think the captain was, well, you know, some sort of space trucker or something who didn't really take his job that seriously and should never have been put in that position in the first place. You know, you don't astronauts and test pilots and scientists on these sorts of and scientists on places like the Antarctic Research Station, you don't send risk takers, because people like that get other people killed. And this guy was a risk taker. So yeah, That's another one. Right, I can go to sheet 2 of suspension of disbelief problems. Now, the next one, I don't know. I'm not sure if this is a bit this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, this one. And there is a scene in the original where basically they get the first encounter with a neomorph, and this neomorph erupts. So basically, the way it works is people can get infected by the black goo, and after a few hours, this highly destructive, aggressive creature called a neomorph gestates within them and erupts out of their body. So I think it just pops out of wherever. It's unlike the xenomorph. It doesn't need a chest to pop out of. It's quite unfussy, this one. Anyway, so one of the guys, I think this soldier in the away team who got infected, one erupts out of him, and one of the characters, he's in this medical bay, and it's a very gory scene. Blood goes everywhere, and after it happens, a woman who had been locked in there with him, who was the she was a wife of the standing captain, if I remember rightly. Or, well, I don't know, wife, that's the wrong way to put it, the partner. They don't actually say if they're married, I don't think, unless I missed something, but it doesn't really matter. Let's just say the romantic companion. And she kind of, this neomorph bursts out and blood and gibs go everywhere, and she kind of then dashes to get a pistol, and she slips over on the blood on the floor. So it's kind of like it's the old slippy blood floor gag. There goes a piece of wire. I've got more. I'll go find that later. Then the science officer who locks her in there, abandons her to die, and then goes and grabs a shotgun, comes back and then decides to open the door, goes in to shoot. She sees the neomorph, goes in to shoot it, and we have the second slips in the blood gag, and she goes flying and hurts herself and loses a gun and has to run away. So it's kind of like twice. I don't know. A little bit overplayed for me, that was. But then again, I don't know if it could equally be quite funny that both of the people were undone by the slippery, bloody floor in medbay. Yeah, I'm not sure on that. All right, so I now just need to locate these two pins onto here and drill the holes into the hull. I think that's about right. I might need to kind of do a little bit of work on these to relocate them if I've not got them right. It's all right. So yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, the double bloody floor gag, 2 crew wiped out. And also the fact that one of the crew just kind of like completely abandons one of the other crew to her death. Or well, locks her in the room with this guy who's got things erupting out of him. I thought it was like, well, that was pretty callous. And then she kind of having contained the neomorph, she then kind of in effect lets it out, although it actually breaks its way out. So then it's like, so the glass on the door of the medbay containment zone turned out to be not particularly good. Another thing in the film, a classic kind of the classic sci-fi. Well, this is kind of like a classic horror cliche, isn't it? One of the crew, so they meet up with David. David takes them to the city of the engineers and kind of gives them a bit of a safe space, well, which you think it is, and they're there. So the crew have had this terrible time, and one of the who's she? Upworth, the medic, says, "Oh, I need to go get cleaned up," and so she wanders off to find somewhere to have a little wash, and it's just like, really, would the captain have let her go alone, given everything that had happened, and given the fact they knew that there were these creatures that they hadn't killed? There you go. That's a nice affirmative fit, that is. Let's locate the other one before we stick it, just to make sure. Do a dry fit to make sure it's even on both sides. Of course, then the fully grown and much more dangerous, yeah, I think more dangerous neomorph, of course, then turns up and decides to have her for lunch, and which it unsurprisingly does in no short order. And Ridley I even felt at this point he'd reused a moment from Aliens when Ferro gets got in the cockpit of the dropship by the alien, and she goes for a pistol but isn't quick enough, and she does Upworth does exactly the same thing. So yeah, it felt like not only was it you know, another kind of like character goes off and gets killed by the monster on their own, but then sorry camera, but then also using reusing a bit of a, I don't know, it felt like a copying Aliens moment. Oh gosh, I'm telling you, I'm in a right moan, aren't I? It must sound like a right moaning mini, but this is kind of like, what I'm really trying to articulate to you is why Alien Covenant really put a lot of feet wrong, and I think it could have been so much better if it hadn't have made these errors. Last one on the suspension of disbelief topic was around the fact that the Covenant had the least safe cryopods in the history of cryopods, and this is because the captain gets incinerated in his cryopod after the neutron pulse accident. And it's like, how did that thing catch fire? Those cryopods, you just can't imagine how on earth something like that could catch fire. I don't know, and certainly as quickly as it did. I don't know, that yeah, and again, that felt like it was played for emotion with the character of Daniels. As a, you know, I don't know, that didn't do it for me. There you go. So got a nice fit there as well. Another, you know, very the sculptors of you can see this kind of like lip that they built on there and built in here, and these actually you got a really good affirmative fit with those. So there you go. And looking, so now just looking at that, to be honest, I think I can just stick that on. That looks like a really well aligned fit. So I want to make sure I get them even. Guess I could probably heat them up and just bend out any inconsistencies, but if I can glue it consistently, that's even better. So yeah, anyway, those are my suspension of disbelief issues with the film of Alien Covenant. And I could probably, if I really sat down and thought a bit harder about it, I think I could probably pull more out. You know, and in the comments, if you want, you know, feel free to share your suspension of disbelief moments or failure to suspend disbelief moments from Alien Covenant. Okay, get this first one stuck in. Nice to get this together. I've been nibbling away at it on and off for a few weeks and doing bits of work. You know, just life getting in the way in general. But it's nice to actually finally get to put this together. So that's that one then. I've got to admit, it's a very solid model, particularly with a bit of pinning, but very nice. Goes together very well. Right, now we've got the second one to do. Right, now let's go back to some good stuff on Alien Covenant. So it's not all bad. I'm doing this like a doo-doo sandwich. Positive points, right. Horror moments. There were some lovely horror moments in Alien Covenant. And Alien is all about horror. And there were some good ones. And Ridley Scott I've got to give it to the man. He's got a disturbed little mind when it comes to doing some of these things. This, again, is like Prometheus. Fantastic moment of body horror in Prometheus when Shaw realises she's about to have perhaps the immaculate or the perhaps diabolic conception and birth the trilobite. She goes and utilises the Medipod, the surgery pod, for a quick C-section and emergency abortion. Yeah, I think it's probably fair. Kind of like abort this horrible, disgusting thing. And it was a brilliant moment of body horror, and he did it because he wanted, I mean, a strong part of the Aliens film and what it's about, it is to do with body horror. And also a lot of it is around how the aliens represent, it's examining the brutality of human birth almost. That's part of it. I mean, there's more to it as well, but and the whole Medipod scene was a really gruesome body horror moment. And Alien Covenant has some of these as well. So the first one would have to be around the birthing of the neomorphs. I'll just pause there a second. The floaty fins, whatever they are now attached. So I now get to drop the turret on. And that's quite exciting because there we go, we have nearly a completed tank now. So what we've got left to do, we've got the turret, we've got the mini turrets to put on, a bit of filling to do up front and do the base. So we are progressing nicely. Let's do this next. So, horror moments. Horror moments from Alien Covenant. So yes, the neomorphs. That's the birthing of the neomorphs is a new and disgusting way of alien creatures coming into existence. And this was pretty... Scott nicely emphasised the revulsion here by having the birthing take place in a sterile white environment of this medical room. And that worked really well, and it was a particularly disgusting scene, but very alien. So yeah, so I appreciated that. You know, alien films should not be safe, tame experiences. They should be edgy. They should be shocking. And yeah, that for me, that was achieved. That was certainly achieved in that scene. Put a little bit of rotation on those. I think it makes it look like, because these things are supposed to have AI, so it makes it look like these things are controlled by an AI and they're looking different directions. It's interesting, this is kind of like a bit more of the old-fashioned approach to have a mixture of metal and resin parts, whereas Forge will do everything in resin for their kits. Warlord still use this mixed medium approach, which I suppose has some advantages. I guess you get a lower failure rate on detail parts or smaller parts if you do them in metal as opposed to resin. However, then you know, they are metal, so they're harder to clean up and more work to do. There you go. So this is looking really rather nice now. It's all together, or nearly all together. Got a nice, I'm pleased with that turret. Nice tight rotation on it. Right. So let's now. I think now we'll do the filling. Because that milliput's been stood for over an hour now. I have to start using it before it starts to stiffen too much. I think this milliput's quite old, so it takes a bit longer to set, which is quite handy, but it still sets fine. Right. So let's fill this. Yeah. So that was the neomorphs were, and then the second neomorph was birthed out of the mouth of a guy, and that was particularly horrible as well. But again, though, that was a bit like the scene from the scene from Prometheus, where they go back and find the biologist guy who was killed, and the hammerpede snaky thing pops out of his mouth. So it's just like, you could, you know, you reused that. I don't know. Am I being too harsh there? Maybe. So yeah, birthing of the neomorphs, nice horror moments. The next one I liked even better because, and this was possibly my favourite horror moment of the film. Not necessarily because it was that horrific, although it was horrific, but because of how it means something in the context of what the original Alien was about. So if you remember back to when I was having my little moan about the shower scene, I can't remember the name of the two crew, but basically the two crew, I think they stayed with the captain on board the ship. They're kind of like pilots, or part of the pilot, maybe flight officers. And anyway, they survived, so they're down in the shower and they're deciding they're gonna get it on, having surviving a couple of the horrific events, and maybe also because they're just they've been in hypersleep for quite a long time, so yeah, maybe feeling a little bit horny. So anyway, this is all happening, and then because of the fact that the spacecraft had a defective warning system, the alien is able to sneak up on them, as aliens are very good at doing, despite the fact that they tend to be around 7 feet tall. But that's why they're great, because you can believe they can sneak up on people. And the tail sort of snakes through and underneath the shower glass, and it's hooking around, and the woman sort of it catches a woman or something, and she's sort of startled, and she steps back from the guy, and then she sees the alien behind the glass screen, and she screams. And then the alien attacks and sort of sends its jaws flying through this glass screen. Now the alien's jaw shoots through the back of his neck and out of his mouth. And she just gets sprayed in blood. And it was, as a shower scene, it certainly ticked the boxes for body horror. And it was a genuinely shocking moment. Now some people, and then, well, she gets it, and then you see, when Daniels and the chief flight guy come later, you see the dead bodies lying in these enormous pools of blood, and yeah, it's very bloody, as the xenomorph's handiwork tends to be where humans are concerned. I mean, some people have said, oh, it's just a classic shower cliche murder scene, but actually no, it wasn't, and this kind of works in the context of what the alien is about. I mean, depending how much you've read about the Alien film and the symbolism of the alien is all to do with representing sexual violence, and in particular, it's a metaphor for rape. And this shower attack scene very much represents. It's symbolic because it represents an alien. Kind of intruding, shall we say, or violating this moment of intimacy between these two humans in a horrific attack which kills them both. And I thought that was, from a point of view of that subtlety of what the alien represented, I found this scene to be actually a rather, obviously disturbing, but as I said, these films are supposed to be shocking. But it was also a kind of a realization of part of what the horror of the alien was about. The fact that it destroyed this moment between these two people and murdered them, or killed them. It can't murder them, it's an alien. Aliens can't murder things. Yeah, I thought that was quite subtle, actually, in that regard. And I appreciated Ridley Scott putting that in, although it annoyed the heck out of me how he framed it, but you know, once you get over that initial disappointment, the actual scene itself, it does have a powerful symbolism to it. So that was my second horror moment that I liked. And the third was right at the end of the film, when Daniels is just about to go to sleep, and Walter is just looking into a capsule as she's dozing. She's waiting for the sleep cycle to begin on the cryopod. And she asks Walter if he will help her build the log cabin when they get to their destination planet. And Walter looks at her blankly because he doesn't know what she's on about. Of course, the reason Walter doesn't know what she's on about is because Walter is actually David, and she has a moment of dawning horror and complete terror when she realises that it's actually David, who David has managed to swap places with Walter, and he's now in control of the Covenant. Yeah. And he then says to her, "Sleep tight, don't let the bed bugs bite." And that is a terrifying moment, that is, when you think about the whole aliens thing and what David was trying to do. Yeah, there were some great horror moments in this film, and that's good because, as I say, alien films shouldn't be nice and cuddly. They should be frightening and disturbing, and they should never be conventional and easy to watch because of the themes they're getting at. So yeah, I'll give Ridley Scott his points for those. Gone off a bit off topic here. I'm starting to fill some of the wings. I'll come back to those. Let's do this. So you can see how I've put the filler in around that. That's actually ended up looking, with a little bit of filler, that looks quite a bit better than I was initially thinking. This will need some sanding and further knife work, and maybe some chisels as well to get it all lined up properly, and I'll rescore this here to get it nicely aligned. But that actually looks pretty good. I'm quite happy with how that's turned out. Right, so we've had good, bad, and good again, and now I'm going to finish on. I think kind of like this is the bads to finish on, and this is the other thing that I didn't like about the film. And these are kind of, I don't know, things about the scene which just makes me think, has Ridley Scott lost his touch with these alien films? And these are things where you just think, no, that doesn't feel right. It's not suspension of disbelief. It doesn't feel right for the universe. So, what's the first one? I felt there was a certain lack of originality with how this story progressed once the xenomorph got involved. And David kind of tricked the replacement captain into a rather grisly end. And the problem I have here is Ridley Scott decided he was going to have fast grow in the bag, almost like fast grow in the bag xenomorphs. So David tricks the captain. He gets taken down into this little lair where he's created his little alien, his xenomorph eggs. He gets facehuggered, and the speed with which the facehugger seems to drop off and implant him is just incredibly fast. And the moment he wakes up, he doesn't even get up before he gets the chest burster erupts. Yeah, and it just felt far too quick. Particularly, I mean, all the other alien films didn't show the gestation cycle happening so quickly. They all create the impression of several hours passing. Even, you know, Aliens, Alien 3 and also Alien 4 Resurrection, they all allowed some time for this to happen. It was not instant aliens. So that was the first problem with that. And then the second thing was also how quickly the alien then appeared to reach full size. So where did all the food come from for it to grow? Even if something grows incredibly quickly, it still needs to absorb some food mass to increase its size. And David's lab didn't seem like it was full of juicy steaks to feed this creature on. So I don't know. Even if it had completely consumed the dead captain, that wouldn't have been enough food to grow even a fraction of its final size, I don't think. Well, maybe a fraction, but yeah, I don't know. So not only was the fact it kind of, I don't know, where does it get to grow, but also the speed with which it grew. It kind of seemed to reach full size in like an hour. In the film Alien, you got the feeling it had taken longer, and Alien 3 as well did a good job on that. So, and in Alien Resurrection, of course, the aliens were grown kind of before the events start, shall we say, because they were created by those experiments. So yeah, it felt like some of the things that happened in the Aliens versus Predator movies, and it just seemed it was accelerated to the point where it's like, why are you using the pace of growth from these other films? Why aren't you sticking to the more sensible or the more believable Aliens films as opposed to going to the Aliens versus Predator bit? So I didn't appreciate that, and it felt like it's just sacrificing the genre for the pace of it that he wanted to create in the film. Yeah, that didn't do it for me. And then what else was there? Oh yes, outlandish action scenes. So the scene at the end when a cowboy hat guy comes down with this utility ship to rescue Daniels, it then has this crazy, well, Daniels and who they think is Walter, they have this crazy scene where this thing's flying around and Daniels is getting flung around on this tether while trying to not get killed by the xenomorph, which, as you know, as they like to do, you know, they're quite you got to give it to the xenomorphs. They're a consistent little bunch of critters. It decided to try hitch a lift. They seem to fundamentally understand that whenever humans are hopping in spacecraft, you want to hop on if you want some more stuff to kill. But yeah, it was just flying all over the place, and she was swinging and flying around this thing, getting bashed off the bottom, and it just felt like you don't need unbelievable action sequences like that. One of the great things with Alien films is the action sequences. You always felt the frailty of the humans, I thought. Part of the horror, because the aliens were so obviously so much stronger than the humans were. And part of that was depicting the humans as in a realistic but quite frail way in the action scenes. This thing, no. Daniels just seemed to be like, she must have had she was immune to taking damage, basically, and it didn't feel plausible. Wasn't keen on that scene for that reason, and it just felt like Ridley Scott had copied some of the Star Trek reimaged films, which do it in, actually I do it in a better way because I'm a bit more comic book in a way. Yeah, I don't know, and a whole variety of other sort of action films. It's like, you don't need to copy when you're doing an Alien film. You don't need to you don't need to make the film like that. Keep it true to its origins. What else was there? Oh, there was the android foo fight. So they decided they needed a kung fu fight between David and Walter, with some cheesy lines, you know, like they've made some improvements and all that sort of stuff. No, I didn't like that. That just felt like Ridley Scott was pandering to cliches from other action films. And again, this is an Alien film. You don't need to do that sort of stuff, but he did. So, although it served a point in the plot evolution, it didn't fit with the film. So, it felt out of place. Just finishing off the last bits of filling. I missed a bit of horror, actually. A good bit of horror was the fate of Elizabeth Shaw, Dr. Shaw. And we don't know exactly what happened to her. We don't know if she died of natural causes or if David murdered her, or if David certainly did some very unpleasant things to her after she died. That was quite disturbing, I thought. At the same time, though, it was sad to kind of see another character get taken out. I don't know, it's hard on that. I say that because I think so much of how the character of Ripley worked well between Alien and Aliens in the original two films. And even Alien 3, she was a survivor. Okay, Alien 3 was supposed to be the end of the road, but you know what I mean. So we're nearly there now. This video is quite a long one actually. I've got a couple more points to do on my alien, and then I'll call it quits. So actually I'm going to change slightly what I was planning to do, so I've not got much left to do. I'm going to assemble the base. I can at least finish up by showing you what it looks like mounted. So let's get on and do that. Finish up on the Alien Covenant bit. This film suffered from reducing the terror of the alien somewhat. Part of this was the fact it was rendered in CGI. Part of the fact is they showed the whole thing so quickly. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Ridley Scott said it himself about the original film and how to make it terrifying. He said, keep it close. Well, he didn't keep it close in Alien Covenant. I don't know. Scenes when the alien was really terrifying was the shower scene, when he did keep it close and you didn't see the whole alien. And it did increase the terror by making your mind think about it more. So yeah, that was a shame. Because the alien is, I don't know, you could debate this. For me, yeah, the alien is an utterly terrifying sci-fi monster, and it's a shame to see it kind of devalued with how it's represented in the film. And I think if you ever see an alien, if you're anything other than, you know, ready to brown your pants, then the director has done, and the special effects team have done something wrong. They should scare the bejeebers out of you. If they don't, then something's not right. Yeah, so I guess there's a CGI representation. Then there's a bit when they showed you the alien eye view when it was stalking Daniels and Cowboy Hat Man. I'm not sure that helped really. As a matter of fact, that didn't help at all. That made the alien distinctly less terrifying. And then when they were actually hatching their final plan to throw it out the airlock, it actually seemed to lack part of its killer edge, and they somewhat outwitted. They somewhat kind of. I didn't quite believe the fact that Daniels managed to survive how close she got to the alien, particularly given she was wearing this enormous clumsy pressure suit. Overly taken by that bit either. So yeah, but I think, and that actually brings me to the end of my notes. So gosh, that took quite a long time to do it to me, but it actually took about the same time as it took to put all this together. So yeah, I think that draws a conclusion. I mean, what I'm actually saying about Alien Covenant, it's a difficult film to decide if I love and hate it. There are bits of it that I really like, and they're so well done, and they do actually tap into something important about the theme of the Alien films. However, at the same time, there are the way the characters behave a lot of the time, and the way that the choice of character portrayals just took so much away from it. And Ridley Scott seems to be too focused on fast pacing of these films at the moment, and by doing that, he compromises the overall quality and believability of the film as a result. So, just like Prometheus all over again, it's a flawed film. Problem is, despite all the clever storylines and all the illusions and literary illusions and things like Ozymandias and the references to Shelley and Byron, which are actually very clever, get diluted down by the loss of suspension of disbelief. So yeah, I don't know, another flawed film, a missed opportunity really. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Alien Covenant. Perhaps you might share some of your thoughts about it. Right, talking about thoughts, here we have our, I think that end of my rant brings us pretty much to the end of this construction session. Kind of neat fitting elements to this kit. It's quite impressive what they've done. Is that? I'm just trying to get the fit right. So it seems to want to rock back, that does. I think I might stick that later. I want to get the right sort of glue to stick this flight base because it's clear plastic. Super glue might craze it. Nonetheless, there you go. It's a nice looking model. It's a very nice looking model, this. I'm rather pleased with it. It's something quite different. I mean, when I originally reviewed this, I said I'd been looking for a sci-fi tank in resin, and this kind of cropped up, and it's just right because it's for a game I've got and played a bit of, and I like the customizable weapon options. Yeah, that's really neat, that is. And you can make the vehicle look very different with the different guns. I'll bob the default plasma cannon back on. Yeah, it is a nice looking vehicle, and it's something different as well. It's a grav vehicle. It's got these sort of hexagon triangular designs on it. So yeah, let me know what you think of this interesting vehicle. I'm going to come back and do more on it. I'll do a model review. I might even talk about some rules as well. I also want to use this as an example for a price point comparison with Forge World, and I'm thinking of price point comparing this against a Pallas Grav Attack, which is a vehicle I think is about the same size. So I need to do a little bit more work to confirm that, but I think that's going to be quite an interesting comparison. I hope you've enjoyed that. Let me know what you think about Alien Covenant in the comments, or Alien films in general. Perhaps Ridley Scott, you've got some opinions on, you know, the great director back at the time when he did The Duelists and Blade Runner and the original Alien film and the other work he's done. You know, has he lost his touch with these last two films? I don't know. As always, I'll be interested to hear. Thank you very much for watching. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.